Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I am Matterall here with Arcia. How you doing, Arcia?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Suetonia is with us.
Hey.
We have Rich Richmond.
Hello.
Caleb is here as well.
Hey, guys.
And of course, Kenneth Feld, super famous these days. How you doing, Kenneth?
Good morning.
All right. He's from CSM. He is also part of Talking in Station as panelist, mostly on the stuff that he is an expert in, which would be industry and beyond, but that sort of gameplay. Okay, let's get started. We have a full schedule today. We're going to do this in a couple ways. One is we're going to have some news up here at first, and then later we'll have a panel with more industrialists. So we'll get some different points of view from different strata of the game, from different points of view on the huge changes that have been announced. And we should just start there. Just tell us, Kenneth, what came out this week that was such a big deal?
Basically, the dev blog dropped. We've been working on it for several months with CCP and the CSM. And if it's a Tech 1 ship in the game, something about it changed. Some things for the smaller ships, I think got better and will, in the long run, make them cheaper. Faction hulls, probably somewhat more expensive. We don't know how expensive yet. And battleships and up are getting considerably more complex to build. And the bigger ships will probably ramp up in price quite a bit.
Yeah, so big industrial changes. These are broad changes. And we expect them to really upset or put into upheaval a lot of different things over a long period of time. And what you should really take away from it, and we'll talk a lot more about this a little bit later, but the big takeaway is industry is changing in a very, very fundamental way, especially the harvests that you need to do and the marketplace for the exchange of those things. The actual building of ships has changed. And we imagine the pricing and the budgeting is going to change as well as all this works together. So, okay. First, let's actually tackle some other news, because there was more in that dev blog than meets the eye, right? Let's move away from the industrial changes and over to other things that were there. Suetonia, what were some of the things that popped out to you?
So they're readjusting the bounty modifier again, as well as the ESS mechanics. It seems like they're going to make it so that more people get, so that the bounty risk modifier is better, so people can make more ISK. But in the same patch, it seems like they're also they're increasing the time it takes for the ESS to pay out. So presumably, I think that means they're probably going to go back to the 3-hour timer they had initially, instead of the 2-hour timer, which is what they set back, as well as reducing the time it takes to steal from it as well. So I think you'll probably make more ISK after the patch, but it'd also be more at risk of PvPers taking it.
What do you guys think?
So I think that the before they lowered the time to the 2 hours, you saw a lot more larger pots available to take than you do now. Like, sometimes you still see some pretty decent pots, but not like before the nerf. So I think it's a pretty good change to raise it back to 3 hours and give the ratters something to compensate to make maybe they'll do better overall, but it'll be more lucrative to drive more content back into the ESSs again.
I think across the universe is a little bit sad. I think CCP should have taken the opportunity and kind of nerfed nullsec's ISK printing right now, because with the changes of industry and the changes that we can then expect in the future, I think ISK printing does not belong in null, because they will have all these nice resources to actually export, and import-export will be massively important in the future because of patches like the industry patch.
Well, I'll go first. As well, on the topic of ESS, myself and a lot of my friends, we weren't big fans of the increase to the amount of time it took to loot things. It gave the defending side quite a lot more time. Just that increase of 90 seconds gave them substantially more time to prepare a full fleet and then get in. It made stealing a lot more difficult. So I'm glad to see that this increase in time is reverted. But maybe not to how it was before, but we'll see how far it's actually reverted.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, from a group like Volta, we were using it to get content when we were like in between fleets. So what we do is in our staging system, we would just have like everyone has like maybe an Ishtar ult each. I mean, like everyone has an Ishtar ult and you're just in a PvP ship on your main. And then once you've been ratting for about an hour doing that, the ESS starts to get pretty juicy and you just get people coming over to fight you. But with the shorter payout, it actually made it harder for us to get fights because it would just, as soon as it gets to that point where people think, yeah, let's take, 15 cruisers and try and take this, it's, being paid out. Another thing as well that's also interesting, let me see if I can find it, is the CCP actually released the commodity deposits over time, top 6. I assume that there's only 6.
Hold on, Johnny. Before you move on to that, I just want to see if Kenneth has anything to say about the ESS.
Well, the ESS thing is what it is, but I just want to point out for the people who are skeptical about the industry stuff that's coming, one of the things with making the industry this more complex is it gives them easier dials and knobs to change to affect building and manufacturing in the future. And it goes back to this ESS. This is the 3rd ESS change in 6 months since it's been put out. These changes are relatively easy. It's just a number change in a database, and you can affect the game in a very large manner across a wide swath of pilots. And if they can set themselves up to do the same changes with industry, to where you don't have to go in and rebalance blueprints, which takes a significant amount of time, and they can make it to where it's just a couple number changes here and there, they'll be able to change a lot more things organically in a lot quicker response to how the players react. And I think this bodes well going forward that they have the foresight to do this. Now, I'm as skeptical as anybody else, don't get me wrong. All I'm doing is pointing out that when the changes are able to be done quickly, they seem to react quicker. And I think that's a good thing overall for all the pilots.
All right. At this point, I'd like to introduce somebody I left out at the beginning, and it's my bad. It's Abby Rova. How are you doing, Abby?
I'm good, thanks.
All right.
Yeah,
Go
no,
ahead, you have a
just
point?
on that topic of the ESS and DBS changes, I know a lot of people that also stopped going to rob banks because of the changes, but what they mentioned at the very bottom of the article was the changes to capital and like super capital ratting. Right, they left a little teaser in there that they're going to look at capital ratting and mining, so maybe they have something juicy to add to entice people to go back out with supers, separate to these DBS and ESS changes.
Yeah, they've kind of announced that already, right? They do have something planned, even though I'm sad that these things are still going to be allowed to do printing of money. I think it's a mistake.
Yeah, well, a point that I wanted to make quickly was if you go to the... I think I posted it in the podcast channel for you, McLeod, if you want to show that on screen. Might be easier for people. But if you go into the monthly economic report, which I think you guys covered earlier in the week, you can actually see the commodities now. And if you take a look at the ESS tags, you can see that it was actually... You can see it like drops down quite heavily after the first month. And some of that's probably just natural... normal inertia. When something comes out, everyone wants to do it, and then after the first month, it's no longer new and cool anymore, so people stop doing it. But obviously, that crashed pretty hard. So hopefully, with the ESS going back to what it was, maybe more of those tags are going to be cashed out.
Wasn't it you, Abby, that named the thing there the fuzzy bump?
No, I don't think so.
When you talked about there was one of the episodes where you guys analyzed this graph and you mentioned the event that suddenly made a ton of overseer stuff available, and someone blamed it on Fozzie.
So Tony, what's the what color are we looking at on that graph for
the yellow line? You can see it at the November things. That's when it was put in. It's called Bounty Encrypted Bonds on the Legend. Those are the ESS tags you get from when you successfully rob an ESS.
And I think it's also worth noting that there's still the secondary banks that they haven't released the information on how to get.
With 8 trillion ISK, where the keys will drop from in-game
Yeah, so much
exploration.
money.
But
Was
with those bounty markers, right? They're also really nice storage of wealth, right? Because you don't necessarily want to sell them.
Oh, explain that a little bit.
Well, when it comes to farming money and speculation and all that stuff, well, two things are really useful for storage of wealth historically. Things that are tied directly to NPC prices and Plex, right? And these, I would say, are almost a little bit superior to Plex, because Plex is massively volatile, and we've been seeing it kind of dropping down over time quite a bit. So I would actually want to keep these, and I'm okay. This is slightly controversial, but if we're talking things like RMT stuff, they also have a little bit of a function as well.
But
There's legitimate RMT. I saw that look on your face there, Rich. RMT is real money trading, and CCP does it all the time. What you're thinking about RMT as a bad thing is illicit RMT, which is when players do it as a third party. That is a different thing.
I mean, I guess you could use them as like a roundabout thing for contracts, because I know some people do that for Plex when it comes to expensive stuff. Instead of putting up like a nix on a contract for 30 bill, whatever it's worth, you put it up for like 30 bill worth of Plex, because then you don't have to pay transaction fees to the NPCs, and you could probably use those items as a similar thing.
I absolutely would not hold on to the bonds, because they don't rise in value, they don't fall in value, they're just, you still have to cash them out and pay taxes. Just turn them into ISK. They're safer to hold. You can't get to, you can carry a few billion worth of bonds in your cargo, and you get shot, you lose it. You cash it into ISK whenever you get the chance. You'll never lose the ISK. You can't lose the ISK from dying.
I was going to say, like, there's no point in like keeping them necessarily, unless you're using them for something like using them as a different form of wealth to avoid like MC transaction fees.
I mean, I could see somebody doing this if Eve had a max money integer stack where you have to start using something that can be easily converted to start trading high amounts of ISK. But there isn't a max stack of cash in Eve, as far as I'm aware. Like, you can easily get 2 to the power of 31 minus 1. And
you completely missed my point.
Hold on. Before you move on, RC, I wanted to get in on that before we move too far away. I don't know if
I was just going to say most of what Rich already said, that they don't change in value because it's an NPC by order. But
this is exactly what you want when you're talking storage of wealth. You want certainty, and then you're only sensitive to ISK supply in the game.
How is it any different than from liquid ISK?
By order.
Just hold ISK.
Kenneth? Oh, he bit into something, so it'll be a while before he's free again.
Yeah, it's not any different from liquid ISK, because if you have a 1 million ISK token, it's a million ISK. You can trade it for a million ISK. You can hold a million. Why don't you just hold a million ISK?
Because ISK is easier to track and it leaves a record. This is why I just said RMT items and RMT trade.
Yeah, but assuming you're not trying to get banned, then there is no real use, right? Aside from the contract thing, or like.
And if you think that CCP aren't looking at those things,
yeah, they're looking at items.
I've lost track of what we're talking about here. RMT again is a thing in the game that is totally legitimate. Real money tradables are what we call Plex, what we call injector, anything tied to Plex, right? Illicit RMT is different. Illicit RMT is when players sell coins to each other. They're not supposed to. That's different.
I feel like whenever somebody says RMT, they're talking about illicit RMT, right?
But again, if you take something like things and transactions that you can do with these things instead of actual liquid ISK, you also have to start talking about corporate and alliance security and how much of the information is shared and how you can do shenanigans. This is also useful for things like siphoning. If you want to siphon in your alliance, this is also a very useful tool.
Caleb, this isn't like buying a small chip of silver that I'm holding here. This is not going to go up and down. This is the equivalent of taking like a British pound sterling and turning it into a Scottish pound. It's worth the same. This you're holding on to something that's even more riskier to hold on to.
Well, I think he has a point with the like security thing because like potentially like having ISK in a corp wallet is obviously quite dangerous if someone wants to steal something. But if you had like I don't know a ESS bounty token that's in a corp hanger that's locked and you need shares to open it, so all of the directors need to vote. Obviously, you can manipulate that too if you have a controlling stake in the corp, but it's safer than like just using the corp wallet outright.
I mean, it's the same risk if you control your like wallet divisions responsibly and you control your hanger divisions responsibly.
You could be a director in a corp and take the corp wallet, but still need shares to like unlock the bounty tokens if they were in a corp office, right? So like it adds like a smaller layer of security, but generally like you should probably just sell them and keep the ISK.
All right. One last thing on this. What I just said about what? Hold on a second. What I just said about RMT is up for debate, so it's not a settled thing. RCL, you'll be happy to know Carneros is on your side, that RMT is considered illicit RMT when people talk about it.
Whenever I hear the phrase RMT, I think of like old McDonald in the self-checkout machine farming for 27 hours a day to sell it on a third-party site. Yeah.
So the gray market, basically, which is bad. And he calls buying from CCP purchasing, which is different. Now, the reason I bring it up is because the marketers in the Tranquility Trade Tower or anybody that refers to Plex items, they call those things RMT items a lot. So that's where my information comes from. But let's move on before we get mired in this hole. Suetonia, is there something else that jumped out at you?
Yes, the CCP are putting in a nerf to cloaky camping, or specifically AFK cloaky camping. So to prevent people from sitting in systems for 23 hours a day, permanently camping a system when they're not active. I saw on the thread as well, I think Brisk Rubel made a point just saying that he's a CSM member. I think most people know that. He said that the CSM has been very clear with CCP that it's just to nerf AFK cloaking and not to nerf like just regular cloaking thing. And Maker Gold is also in that Reddit thread. I'll see if I can find it after I stop in a second, so McLeod might be able to bring it up on the screen for you. But he said that Omega Gold said there was changes coming to help keep Assault gameplay. So
Assault gameplay? I wonder what that means.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find the actual quote. Trying to remember it because I read it
All right.
2 days ago.
What do you guys think of it being a tool, not a structure specifically? It could still be a structure, but they called it a tool.
Yeah,
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, the way they phrased it was very interesting. A new Intel tool is also coming, one that will offer a novel defense against covert operations, which to me sounds like a new D-scan or probes or something like that, something active that maybe, I don't know.
Depth charges. Right, Suetonia.
So far, they've been mums a word on it. Lips zipped up. They haven't I haven't heard anything on exactly what it is in detail. So until more information is revealed on just what this tool is, I don't know what to say about it. It could be anything. It could.
Well, if it becomes some submarine depth charge thing, I'm sure that DBRB is going to be canceling his honeymoon.
Kenneth?
I mean, we had a hour-long CSM meeting this past Thursday on it, so we all have a fairly good idea of what's coming. Obviously, I can't talk about any of that, but I will say this. The AFK cloaky camping thing, CCP realizes that's a problem in game, and they want to fix it. And the way to fix AFK cloaky camping is probably not to allow some Intel tool to work AFK as well, right? You wouldn't want to give someone a tool that works in a non-active manner to find someone who's acting in a non-active manner, right? So all of this is centered around some sort of active gameplay, Intel, that type of stuff. That way, the active players, the ones that are logged in doing something, are the ones that come out on top.
Yeah.
This has been, Arcia, go ahead, then I want to make a declarative phrase. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, I hope it does focus on the completely AFK pilots and not like I have a dual boxed alt that's cloaked in a system and I'm at my computer, and I should be able to be paying peripheral attention and avoid it. So I hope it doesn't ruin that, because I don't think there's anything wrong with that if you're actually at the computer.
And as well with wormholes, it'd be interesting to see how this affects wormholes, where you can be cloaked up for 6 hours but be actively following a fleet or something.
Let me just go back to the beginning on this cloaky camping. Kenneth, can you describe it a little bit for people that may not understand what that technique is and why it's important?
It's basically a pseudo blackout. If you're going to go invade someone and you want to run the ADMs down in the system to make the entosis and taking the system better, the easiest way to do that is to stop them from ratting and mining in the system. So you just park an alt in the system that you log in at downtime, push the cloak button, and you stay there until downtime the next day. They don't know if you're active or not. They just know that you're there, and you can feed intel to other people. So if you see 3 supers start ratting, then maybe other people can come in and tackle them, like the Sino, that kind of stuff. So the people who are less or more risk averse will not mine or rat in that system. And if you stop mining and ratting, the ADMs go down and make it easier for invading forces to come in. So it's a dual tool, and it denies people the ability to have an income, the line members, and it also makes it easier for an invading force to take the system away from them. Now, there's other gameplay with some periphery stuff, but that's the general gist of it.
Right. And it's loathed because what it does is it makes people who are trying to make an income in peace like never feel secure. So those people don't like it. And then empire builders don't like it because, as you said, it reduces activity, which reduces their defense modifiers. So basically systems get weaker and weaker and weaker. And that's one of the things you'll see is deploy cloaky camping. One group will do that against another in order to begin an invasion. That's usually one of the first things that happens, that kind of harassment.
Yeah, there is some uses for it, like using it to target bots, for example. So you can put a cloaky camper in a system with a bot, and then they won't be able to rat anymore, so you shut down the bot. And if they whitelist your character, where they decide to ignore your character after a few days sometimes, you can then kill the bots. But I'm not too worried about it being removed, like being that aspect of hunting bots being removed. So I think CCP has actually done a really good job in the last year and a half. Ever since they announced, I think it was at eVegas 2019, their new, I think it's called Sentinel or something, the new system that they've been using. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot less bots around that I've seen. Like I roam NoSec almost every day, and I very rarely find bots now. Like it's maybe like once a week, or maybe if I'm specifically looking in certain regions, specifically looking for them. But before that Vegas presentation, there were like whole regions in the game where you could tell that there was probably more bots in this region than actual players.
Yeah, maybe that's why the PCU looks like it's gone down a little bit, because all those inactive bots are off and no longer working.
And
the
I
Sentinel.
Can tell you,
yeah, go ahead.
Let me just describe the function.
The Sentinel, yeah,
huge.
Can you talk about the Sentinel program so we know what that is?
Me? No. Sorry.
Okay, let me just do this. The Sentinel program is basically something that is compared against reports. So if I'm a player and I see something that looks suspicious, I report it to CCP. They take that report from human eyes and they compare it to their Sentinel data. I guess I don't know exactly how it works, but it's basically looking at patterns. And so they compare those two things, and if they find that both things match, and it does look like a bot, then they act on it. Then they return an email to the player that reported it in the first place saying, thank you, we got him. And so players have been receiving thank you letters from CCP ever since that program went into effect. Go ahead, Kenneth.
No, I'm just saying that program has been very well received and very helpful in CCP's quest.
Isn't there in the new Hobo Leaks a skin that people who report bots are going to get or something I heard about?
Yeah, I've heard there was also in another Hobolix thing, there was something called like the bot reward program. And actually in BDO, which is, obviously another MMO that Pearl Abyss owns, they have bot hunting programs where if you report a bot and it gets banned, then you get a small reward, like you get 5 days game time or something. So in this case, it seems like maybe CCP could give you a skin if you report a bot and then they get banned.
I'm wondering if this reward is going to be retroactive. Like, when do they begin counting? Because they recently released the number of bots being banned, and I went through all of my emails and calculated it. Out of all the bots that were banned from reports, I account for 4% of them. One person. And I'm, puts a grin on my face to realize that. But I'm curious how they're going to be distributing the rewards.
There may have been 25 people that reported one bot, too.
Ah. Yes, that's also a very real possibility.
You've been made redundant.
Redundancy is good.
No, I mean, that's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy. I don't like bots any more than anybody else. Get rid of all of them. But, what you're saying all makes sense. And then that would be pretty cool to have a skin that I would probably press to not have it be tradable. The pilot that's reporting, you redeem it, and it goes directly to your in-game, you can't sell it on the market type thing.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And
I wouldn't want this kind of thing to be sold.
Yeah, definitely. It should just be redeemable from the email, and it should be applied retroactively.
That and a medal, right? Why don't they use the medal system for unique rewards like
the Galente Grand Prix racers got medals?
Oh, okay.
So
maybe
they should use that more. Yeah.
I mean, that's unique.
In-world medals from organizations is really cool, I think.
Yeah, the top 5 of the I think it's the top 10 actually of the Abyss Proving Ground event. Also got a medal from the Triglavians, which is really cool.
That was non-approving.
Tisk.
You danced for the triangles. You're their little playthings, Suetonia.
See,
all right.
Elisa's not even been gone for a week, and already she's got a new target.
Oh no, they've been playful like cats a long time, even before the show. All right, what else did you see, Suetonia, in there, or any of you guys? But Suetonia's got a list here, so let's go through that.
Oh, 1 second.
Yeah. Anybody else got well, not aside from the changes, like we can talk about the industry stuff, but I think you wanted to move on to that, right? That up. Yeah, we'll open that up in a minute.
I think Garcia had something about some fights in Losec, and there's also some Goonswarm Keepstars that died this week, and some more stuff that you might want to talk about.
Yeah, so let's move over to war news now and conflicts. We'll start with Arcia's Losec stuff, right?
All right, just a brief mention in the Snuffed Out saga. Snuffed Out anchored a Keepstar in Secede on their second attempt. The first attempt was destroyed on the anchor timer. The second attempt went up successfully, and then they reinforced the Secede Keepstar belonging to Siege Green. And Wrecking Crew and Siege Green and all that reinforced the sieging Fortizar on that they anchored in Secede, and they reinforced the Lanthorn Fortizar of Snuff. So then everybody alarm clocked for 7 a.m. for the Siege Green Keepstar on yesterday morning, and 7 a.m. my time, obviously. It's like just after downtime or something. And that repaired. Snuff didn't show up to that. And they've Wrecking Crew and Co. followed up on the Fortizar timers in both Secede and Lanthorn, and they are now going to Hull Timer. So there should be some spicy events for Snuff's hull timers on their Siege Fortizar in Secede and their Lanthorn Fortizar that has been up for a while now. So things are getting spicy in the anti-snuffed out saga, where Wrecking Crew and Siege Green and a lot of other groups in Losec have who normally a lot of people who in these groups normally shoot each other have banded together, and it's kind of funny. I posted like something on Twitter after the event where like Milsec gameplay is a bunch of blues sitting around on a keep star waiting for reds. Losec gameplay is a bunch of reds sitting on a keep star waiting for more hated reds, right?
Yeah. The darker reds are getting attacked by the other reds.
The minus 15 reds.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, we're watching that situation as well. I think actually Tuesday is the final timer. Is that right? I think.
Yes.
A couple Fortizars there. It'll be interesting. Okay. Also in war news, I don't know, Kenneth, you yesterday you were on the Meta Show. You did a really good job explaining some of these industry things, but you also talked a little bit about the war and your own perspective, and you said something along the lines of, I have 14 Titans and they're all going into this war. I'm in it until Wendy Q is wrecked. Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, I pretty much said it. You know, you always have that uncle that comes to visit and never leaves, and he smells funny and he puts his bare feet on the coffee table. Well, that's me. I'm in T5Z and I ain't going anywhere until they're, well, I mean, obviously, if we say, hey, the war's over and we leave, I'm leaving with them. But, you know, I don't have, if I was in charge, I don't have any plans of leaving until, you know, both of us can have no Titans left and we're fighting with Corvettes. I don't much care. You know, I don't want to, I kind of, after I went back and listened to it, I kind of sound harsh. If we all go to Vegas, I'll gladly buy him a drink or a beer or whatever. I'm not going to buy Mittens one of those little fruity drinks that he likes, but, you know, I'll buy him a beer or a whiskey. But that said, you know, in game, nah, not stopping until they're a pile of rubble and I can freaking salvage their wrecks.
That's one mean uncle, but we'll call him Rattlesnake, Uncle Rattlesnake.
I think it's important to have a good attitude towards the people you fight in game, out of game, right? So like, I think that whole idea of we fight in game and together when we meet in real life, we have drinks together is a really good one. And like, because at the end of the day, the people you fight with in the game, you're playing the game with them, right? Are you going to play like Monopoly against somebody you hate? No, right? So
well, not at the beginning.
You shouldn't actually like you. It's more fun when you're fighting against people who you actually like respect outside of a game, I think.
I think respect is probably pushing it a little too far.
Too strong a word.
You know, yeah.
That's my opinion.
Some of them. Now, the guy who got me in this game is in Goons. So, and I've known him for better part of 25 years now. I was in the Navy with him for many years. I wouldn't vouch him into PL, but I love him to death. I will, you know, he's been to Vegas with me. You know, I attended his wedding, you know, all that kind of stuff. That's all great. But yeah, there's a line there, and thou shalt not cross.
Do you see that? That the bonds of EVE Online are stronger than real life friendships that go back years? That's interesting.
My wife doesn't have my passwords nor how to get into my clients. If I die, the passwords aren't in my will either. The what I have just goes away. Period.
But to be fair, right? You just like in sports, you do need hatred for at least the twice times 45 minutes that you're on the field, right? So fake hate is at least required.
So like RP, like in my case, it's RP, and like Arcia has opinions that might be different from my opinions, right? Arcia, the character.
Do you ever argue?
I'm not actually in New Eden, so I wouldn't actually interact with her. She's not a good person, right? But we are mass murdering sociopaths who control spaceships with our minds. So it's unsurprising that our characters hate one another, but I don't think we should. And I think it's more fun after a fight if you can talk to the people you fought with and talk about the fight on like a friendly level, it's like, oh, wasn't that so cool when so and so shot so and so first or whatever, you know.
Right.
Well, the other day after a big old fight, Headliner gave goons a ride home on his, bridge out. So,
Oh, really?
at least I think he did. I'm not sure. There's still, I don't.
Well,
see. My problem is I don't know who a lot of these people are, and I'm kind of embarrassed by it. So I should probably know, but
no.
I
Keep
don't.
yourself
And,
in the
and
dark.
honestly, I don't even care. Just whatever, shoot them.
Yeah, just take all that space fame and like put it into a box. Treat everybody the same. All right. Love that hardcore nature, though, Kenneth. That's what makes this game like actually competitive, is playing and outplaying really smart people like yourself. And you're committed to this war, and you're going to see it through. Okay, but let's see now on the board what happened this week. That was, I believe, is it 3 or what's the count on Titans that died? Keep Stars that died in Delve in just this week.
I believe it was 3, right? Well, actually, it was 5, I think, because Monday the 22nd is technically part of last week, right?
I had to buy ammo 4 times.
But yeah,
it's just according to plan, right? It's supposed to be 3 to 5 on average every week from now till 4 months in the future.
50 days is the 50 days if there is no acceleration, which there appears to be. So maybe I would say 43.
42.
Just pull that out of the head. Yeah, 42, 43 to 50 days to clear all the structures that have been cleared. And the big structures are the only ones being counted. There's a lot of small structures too. We saw in TNT territory, everything's reinforced. That whole system, it's one of 2 systems, and TNT's no longer there. They evacuated their stuff safely, but a ton of structures are being targeted and largely uncontested, I think.
How many
Are they going to
ports with the special rigs have died?
Are they going to be able to fill all the 6 slots with keep stars on the top of Ezekiel?
I don't know. Expect that to just keep piling up as I believe they are. We had a Titan count. I don't have it handy, but I think it's. I think they're like 2/3 the way through, maybe getting close to half the way through. There's still some systems that don't even have iHubs in there to capture the system in order to make it safe in order to destroy the Keep Star. So some like 12 systems still need iHubs put in place if they're going to destroy those Keep Stars. But there are plenty this next week that are basically ready to go if Pappy Forces are ready to take it. Caleb, we said this a while ago. You said it, not me, that Delve has fallen. I think you're right. And we're looking at what? The demolition phase?
Yeah, it's now the tough job. Ironically, I'm doing something very similar in real life with cleaning out for my kitchen being built. So this is very similar. They have to clean out all this stuff, and because Willy is persistent that it has to be clean before 1DQ, which is going to be a little bit funny because that's going to drag it out at least 2 months, right? According to the Doom Clock board.
Yeah, the Delve actually has an iHub in every single system except for one, I believe, that's claimable, which is, I believe, I think Goons killed it. I'm not sure if there's a Keep Star in that system, though. In 9-0 attack, the other systems that don't have iHubs in are NPC stations.
I think they did reverse one iHub. Well, no, but it got reversed again, so that was only broken for a day. But they did break the chain of consistency that's needed for the 35 days to put in a Sino jammer on one system at least.
Yeah, but they can just do that system last, right? Like, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's why I said that's not the one that's probably without a jammer. Well, anyway, the point is, go ahead.
On the whole politeness and not so hateful stuff, I did almost feel like when Pappy took the whole TNT space thing, they managed to evacuate a lot, and it felt like they were like waving at them when they took all their stuff out, and just before the demolition.
Right, but they're going to 1DQ, which is being island out. It's not like they've escaped. They've just gone to where everybody else is. The tribe has consolidated into one section, or the empire into one system, really. and it's sitting there strong as can be, waiting for, because they have a ton of structures there, a ton of defensive structures there. They're waiting for the enemy to try to invade that one system, 1DQ. Kenneth, what's your opinion on what's going to happen in the future there at 1DQ?
I'm probably going to build stuff, and it's probably going to get blown up. I am not in any of them channels. I don't know, don't care, really, as long as it ends up as a wreck. I'm probably not the person in Pappy to be asking about that. That said, does anyone know if Ermelin is the asset safety spot for 1DQ? Okay, it is. With a Frat Fortizar sitting on the undock of the only kickout station in system.
I was theorizing, right? Because we're trying to play with this new idea of the industry and how it's changing. And I was thinking, if I was in the Imperium, would I want the asset safety right now when the Titan is worth a little bit less than it may be, when it gets calculated later? Like right now, it may be worth 80 to 100 to 120 billion, but it may be worth 140 to 200 billion in a few weeks. Would I want to asset safety that right now? Or would I even want to demolish it and sell the parts at this point, like insurance fraud used to work, right? Is it worth more dead than alive, basically? And I was thinking that, and then I was told by both sides to stop thinking that way, that nobody's going to do that, this is an emotional
breaking it into
fight
parts is worthless because you only get 55% back now. It's not like the old days where you could get a whole Titan back when you reprocess. So you
that's
only
a non-starter.
you only get 55% of the parts. So that just won't work.
And I've heard, I don't know if this is true, if you tear down a ship that's already built, do you get subcomponents or do you go all the way down to minerals and gases?
No, so if you reprocess a Titan, you would get capital components, and then you would have to reprocess again to get minerals and lose another 45%.
Oh, so you're constantly losing every time you're reprocessing.
Correct.
Yeah. And in the future, go ahead.
I was going to say, since they're not taking away parts, they're adding them. So, ideally, you want to hold on to the Titan because it's going to increase in value significantly after the phase.
Well, that's what I mean. Asset safety. I'm not telling anybody to do this. I'm just theorizing. Asset safety now, cash. Pay your 15% at the lower Titan price. Then everything switches, and then you reprocess to sell those parts.
Well, you don't reprocess it. You just sell it on contracts because it's going to be worth way more.
Yeah, you say that,
you
but
still only get 55%, even though it's the new components. It's not going to, the amount of, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this, but the amount of minerals that are going to be in a new Titan versus an old is slightly less, but the components themselves aren't going to be the big jump in price. That's going to be the other stuff that's added in. So the rate of the return on that, what you're talking about, just isn't going to be there.
There's just a little bit of a correction to the whole thing of it going up in price. Yes, it's going up in cost to produce. That does not necessarily mean it's going to go up in price. If you want to talk about the price of something like Titans, we cannot do that until 1DQ has fallen, right? Because as Willy was pointing out the other night, well, this comes down to existing supply as well. So even though you can say, well, to build a new one will cost considerably more, that's not really relevant when there is potentially a lot available that people want to offload.
Well, there was a shortage of Ragnarok hulls, though, for test, right? They were having trouble reimbursing people who lost Ragnarok because they had spare Titan hulls of all the other kinds that they could give people, or they could give them money. They just couldn't give them a Ragnarok hull, so...
Exactly. So it's going to be very much dependent on what is actually available in the game and what is the cost to build a new one. So I think we were talking about shorting certain Titans because of this, because there's some that will not go up in price potentially.
And when the redistribution starts, the price is all different all over again. What we say today, the minute the next, I don't know what devblog's next. Sutuni has a better idea than I do. I'm on the CSM. But that said, when the next devblog drops, the price changes again. The next devblog drops, the price changes again. So I have no idea what's going to happen yet.
Yeah. Plus, these are items that are not sold necessarily on the market. They're usually sold by contract to known parties and that sort of thing. So that's a whole negotiated price tag, and that has totally different demand pressures and supply pressures.
And this ties into the industry changes, right? Kenneth was explaining how many of the things that they have put into these new formulas, right, are items that are kind of not used much right now. So they are extremely cheap, and no one really trades them because they're useless. They don't do anything. They have very narrow niche utility. But when all these things come in, where those prices are going is anyone's guess, because, well, of course we know what the sources is, but who's going to start doing that? Who's going to push their labor from one activity to that activity instead? It's going to be very complicated, because usually you have these seesaws, right, in the game. So when you mine one thing, at some point you've mined so much that now it's dropped in price. Now it's more valuable to mine something else, and then you shift. But the more items you have, the more you have to shift out that activity labor-wise on all the items. So the volatility of EVE market-wise is going to go up, and I'm very positive on that one.
Yeah, that's something I think can't be stressed enough right now. There's a lot of people predicting where prices will end up exactly, and they're all just guesses. Nobody can say with any certainty, once the next couple of dev blogs and changes come in, where anything will end up.
Think about it like this. Last week, what was it? Every nullsec alliance is going to need a high-sec entity to mine Trit in order to build Titans. Then we find out yesterday, hey, that's probably not true. So anything we're thinking today, and now Monday, metaphorically, it could change, right? So, yeah.
Last night I lost my Vexor Navy, and I looked in. I was in Cheetah looking for a new one, and somebody had bought out all of the Vexor Navies. Everything's been scalped, just like the graphics cards right now. And they were up to about 150, 180 plus last night. Today, somebody's shipped some more in. I believe at the time this update was announced yesterday, a few members from various Discords went up and bought prospects all around and flipped them for profit. If anybody's speculating about what the prices are, nobody knows. It could go up, down, left, right, sideways.
I'm just going to say that people that are behaving like this right now could end up holding the ball for quite a long time, because even though these replacement things are changing, it's all going to be dependent on the actual destruction numbers, because current stockpiles is really what sets the price. Trying to corner like this, unless you've actually got the monopoly and cornered everything in one specific items, you're not going to be able to hold this forever. And it's the same, anyone that's right now doing rage builds of all these things at the old costs and values, well, the more people do that, the more likely it is that the price is not going to change. And you can't just lock the price unless you want to lock up massive amounts of wealth in your hangar for years. And we are talking years. When barges changed, people had stockpiles for years. When battleships changed, they had stockpiles for years. If you really want to lock up your wealth like this, I'm just going to say that's a little bit dumb of you. So consider waiting till things settle.
With easy and fast money is easy and fast risk. If you're going to start chucking your money at things and trying to make it stick, keep in mind it's a coin flip. It could go either way.
Well, because if you think about it, right, if you end up spending 2 years selling off the stock that you have increased in value by, let's say, 75, maybe even 100%, like with the battleships, sure, that's nice. But if you start calculating how much money you could have made with the same wealth in the same period of time, it's really not a good profit.
Let me bring this up. Akulo says, no offense, CSM, but I stopped buying. The CSM will iterate a long time ago.
Yeah, and we already talked about that. ESS has been out 6 months now, and they've iterated for the third time on it. So there's an iteration that requires a lot of work, and there's iteration that requires a small amount of work. And the small amount of work is happening, and that's what they're trying to drive this industry to. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to iterate on industry right now. This is far from iteration. They're still making the building blocks. The iteration will happen once they say, okay, redistribution's done, industry updates are done, and scarcity is over, then you're in the iteration phase. But I still think that's going to be 12 to 18 months from now.
Yeah, Kulu's not convinced. He says, well, they've promised to iterate on many things and stuff. What's the distinction between how they used to iterate and how they're iterating here? You just said it, but maybe re-emphasize the dials.
Yeah, the iterating, if they have to go in and start monkeying with BPOs and that kind of stuff, that takes a developer and a programmer and a team to do. Whereas if you're just changing, like, I'll give you a great example. When Bara changed the amount of waypoints, or not waypoints, what do you, the things in space, you right click and save location. Bookmarks, yeah. When she said I did a thing and she put that little picture on Twitter where it changed to 500. You know, that was a single quick change that probably took her 20 minutes to do, right? Those are the type things that we're talking about that they can iterate on easily.
And another example is the gas you were talking about, right? Right now they're putting it not exclusively in wormhole space, right? So they're putting it out into low sec space as well.
No, okay. There's two different gases. There's the booster.
Can I just finish my point? They're taking something that is exclusive to one area of space and adding it to more space, but they can roll that back, and that will considerably change everything in the current industry.
Well, rolling that back would take quite a bit of work. But what they can do is when they make this little gas site and they put 5,000 of each gas in there, changing that to 4,000 of each gas is extremely easy, or 2,000 of each gas. That's extremely easy. Changing where it exists, that's why they're doing this big change now. It's kind of the differentiation.
A lot of the current problems exist in things that are hard to iterate on. So it's great if they add a lot of stuff that's easy to iterate on, but how do you see them going back to stuff that might be hard to iterate on, stuff like maybe faction warfare that needs a lot of love?
Yeah, that type of stuff, what they're doing with the ecosystem right now, that's basically a 2-year project or 2.5-year project. Once that's done, I mean, they don't have 10,000 developers, right? So they have a team. So once this team is complete and the ecosystem is done and it's more in maintenance mode, then they can look at, okay, what's the next thing we want to tackle? Whatever they choose, and the CSM doesn't really get to decide that, right? That's done by high-level people in CCP. And if they say, okay, next, you guys are going to work on faction warfare, and they get their team, whatever they call the team, together, and they work on it, then it would probably be 6 months of them thinking about it, and what can we do to change? They may present it to the CSM at that point. Hey, this is kind of what we're thinking. What are your thoughts on it? That kind of stuff. Now, whether they can get that team together in 6 months or a year from now, or whenever they have the developers, and there's certain skill sets that they need for certain things. Like not every developer, and I didn't know this when I first got on the CSM, not every developer can do everything type deal, right? So like if they're going to touch this type of system, then they need this specific developer. And there may be only a few, so they have to wait for them to become available and other people to become available and make that team. And I cannot possibly tell you when that would happen or what would have to happen to make that work. I do know that Phantomite and Torvald on the CSM are highly motivated to get low-sec and faction warfare looked at, but I don't know that CCP has the people, the time, or to be able to pull that off right now.
It does feel like a lot of stuff comes into the game and then is just like never touched upon again. You see things like faction warfare, which has received very minimal changes over the better part of a decade. You see things like incursions, and now, I mean, it's newer now, but people are expecting the same of like Pochven. Wormholes are often overlooked. Resource wars, oh God, resource wars, right? Like, and the list goes on, and it just, stuff like that does grate on people, especially people who like the content.
But it's because of what Kenneth kind of hinted at, right? If you create designs that are difficult to iterate on, where you have to almost like go all the way back and look at the entire project, because all the ones you just mentioned was something that had a lot of development time, and then they got packaged, put in a box, and put in the game. Then going back in there and changing things and iterating on it will potentially not be very useful. It would be very time consuming. But if you, from the beginning, as this stuff seems to do, have a plan on making it easy to iterate on by creating knobs on the outside of the box that you can turn whenever you want, then it becomes very simple to actually improve and change things, especially if you know what each knob does, which is a little bit of a problem when you're talking economy things, right? Don't turn 2 or 3 knobs at once. You're going to mess things up. Stick to one. We've seen many examples of CCP doing too many knobs at once. But in the future, I think that they could go back and look at some of the things that you did mention, Arcia, which is find ways to create knobs that actually goes into those boxes individually.
Forgive me for putting on the red tinted glasses hearing this, but to hear that the CCP are able to have to take their time with these changes that require a lot of work, and it's relatively easy just to change a number. If it's so easy for Grandpa CCP to crash the economy by turning a 1 into a 0, proverbially, I'm surprised there isn't more updates that just involve changing a number. Mid-slot there, a low slot there, an increase in here. I'm surprised there's not more balance updates in that case. Ones that, some ships and some areas of the game sorely need.
I think that's because of procedures, right? Changing something like 1 or 2 things fast and dirty is only expected when it's when it's an actual fix, right, and not a change. If it's a change, it needs to go through processes in CCP, and it's almost like you also need to like at least mention it to the CSM potentially. So then it's not as easy to do fast and dirty.
Yeah, but they're definitely pushing themselves towards having a lot more knobs and buttons and dials that they can change to adjust things, like, you know, that's been their focus on the ecosystem and stuff, splitting everything out, decoupling everything, and then they can tweak every little bit as they see fit. Much more quicker.
I can tell you iteration. This, the CSM has brought up that when Team Talos was first brought out, it was every 2 weeks something was changing or getting iterated on, or, you know, whatever. And that cadence has seemed to have slowed. Yeah, we have brought that up, and that's about all I can say about it, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up the other stuff, and we're going to now go into an industrial panel. And we'll be back in a few minutes to bring on some new guests and to talk about these things in depth. Please stick around. This will be the meat and potatoes of what's going on. But before we do that, I have one last question for this panel specifically, because I don't want it to become a big focus. Ganking in the new industrial world. We hear that gankers are upset because freighters aren't really being touched by this change, and they want freighters to become more expensive, so they're a bigger prize to kill. And they believe their ships have gone up in price over the last 2 to 3 years. What do you guys say to that?
I think they're crybabies because the ships are actually going to get a lot cheaper. Like things like catalysts and like anything that's battlecruiser and down, which is what gankers use. Tornadoes, Talos, catalysts, trashers, those kind of things. They're all going to get way cheaper. And the jump freighters are probably going to stay around the same price, if not get a bit cheaper, I guess, if minerals go down in value once CCP redistributes them.
They're not going to get any bigger payout, technically.
Freighters and jump freighters are going up.
They'll get a bigger number on Z-Kill, but they're not getting a bigger payout. I'm puzzled what they're looking for.
So I wonder if Skybreakers are going to go down in price to farm catalysts easier in Udama.
And they completely missed the point that with all this needed new logistics, you're going to see an increase in targets in space and potentially an uptick in the cost of things like freighters and jump freighters. So I don't see why they're crying. it's provable that this is actually going to be out of balance in their favor.
Yeah, if anything, right, with the fact that you now need reactions to make battleships and all of this new stuff, there's going to be a lot more traffic between these low sec and high sec systems. So potentially there's choke points where these gankers can set up and gank people as they're coming out of the low sec into the high sec, or through high sec to move their materials into low sec or null sec to start reacting.
Kenneth, last word on this?
Yeah, the CSM is acutely aware of this, and we have been working with CCP on a variety of options there. And yeah.
I just have to ask you this one question. I don't want to open this topic up. It'll go too long. But why hasn't CCP dealt with ganking and retention issues in high sec? It's high security space. Why shouldn't it be secure? It's high security.
They did recently, didn't they? They increased the hit points of freighters when they did the surgical strike patch to kind of counteract the fact that people using Tech 2 guns on Taloses and Catalysts or whatever would be doing more damage to them.
Yeah,
high security space isn't supposed to be super safe.
It kind of is. That's the original fucking premise.
All right, let's let Kenneth get in, and then we'll get out.
Okay, so I know the answer. I don't know if it's public. I will talk to the person that I know I heard it from their mouth and get back to you. But I'm pretty sure he said, I'll just go ahead and say it. I'll say it publicly. They have seen over the years that someone who gets ganked is more likely to stay in the game.
Yeah, that's public.
Okay.
But here's the distinction. It's not get ganked. It's get shot at. Not necessarily killed and set back, but shot at
they don't
and
differentiate.
adrenalized.
They don't differentiate. If they get killed or ganked, it's still killed, and they're generally more apt to stay.
Well, I figure this, cat and mouse, when somebody chases you as a child, you just giggle like crazy because it's fun and exciting, But if you get tackled and face planted into the dirt, it's less fun. It's less funny if you actually get killed and set back.
I think you're also more likely to look up what happened and then learn about the game when that happens.
I can only tell you what they say the data represents. And
okay.
If you get killed or ganked, you're more likely to stay in the first 2 weeks or whatever it is.
Yeah,
so it's actually Texas, good for retention.
It's Texas shooter fucking science, and it's bullshit. It's right, not true. You're sampling from people that already stay. It's like, they get more resilient. No, they were resilient and resilient ready when they started playing the game because everyone else has already left the game.
Okay, again, we're not going into this topic. Sorry, guys. We will just do a whole episode on it if you want, because it's a huge wound that's been around for a long time. And that's why I wondered, and I brought it up. But next, we're going to bring on some industrialists. We'll be right back after these messages. Oh, welcome back, Talking in Stations. We are talking about the industrial changes that have hit or going to hit in the near future. We have a number of industrialists in here with us. So what we'll do is do quick introductions for each of them to let you know where they're coming from, and you can match their voice to their experience. And we'll start with Khan, who you see on screen here.
Hey, my name is Industrialists Khan. I play with a demo. I play for the
Damn fam
Alliance in ISEC. My history basically revolves around faction warfare and mining and faction warfare space. I was a RPer back in the day, but now I'm just more of a casual support miner for the faction that I fly for, which is the Minotaur.
Awesome. Yeah, one of the coolest stories I've run into in EVE is faction war miner support stuff. It's pretty cool. It's good to have you here, Khan, also part of Talking in Stations. We also have Nick here, and also on camera. How's it going, Nick Bison?
Another day in paradise. I'm actually kind of stoked about these industry changes. They're going to be a massive pain in the backside for me because I'm so small, but it's going to be fun. Something new to figure out.
Yeah. So what kind of mining or what kind of industry do you do?
Pretty much, well, let's see. Right now, it's pretty much been exhumers, barges, orcas, basically everything in the ore line, and most of the Galente stuff below battleship is just kind of where I've been hanging my hat.
Okay, cool. Okay, off camera, we have Dusk. How are you doing, Dusk?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Good. Can you tell us a little bit about your background in the game?
I am mostly a very small corp player, or even more so a solo player. I have a tendency to, I have 2 accounts, but I have a tendency to play one at a time, not really dual box. I do a lot of solo mining in HiSec. I do some very small scale industry, mostly self-sufficient stuff. I like to build what I use. I really don't play towards the market aspect. And then I do some mission running and some anomalies on the side.
Cool. And you're very interested in theory and industrial theory and that sort of thing, right?
My professional background, I was a military analyst, and then I got out, and now I'm a biologist who works in conservation. So I really enjoy the ecosystem aspect.
Great. Okay. We also have a G.I. Joe. Can you tell us about your background, G.I. Joe?
Yeah, sure. At the moment, I'm doing about 3 things at the same time. I'm heavily invested in industry and the market, and on the other hand, I'm actively participating in high-sec warfare with Black Flag, mercenary work, contracts, and stuff like that.
So you're with mercenaries in high sec. Okay, good. We also have one of my favorite players, actually, is Nick Lorenzio. How are you? Nico.
Hello. My name is Nick Lorenzio. I started in '04, and as far as industry goes, well, I've been doing a bit of sub-capital industry on a small scale for, I don't know, close to a decade. Nothing like capital-wise, but Tech 2 sub-capital, and had a corp oriented around industrial,
Yeah.
like small corp.
Nico, you're specifically interesting in this aspect because you created one of the biggest service corporations the game has ever seen, Pro Synergy, that matched up mission runners with salvagers.
Yes, the founder of ProSynergy, and we probably processed way over $1 trillion, probably closer to 2-3 trillion worth of loot over the years. So,
Yeah, that's not corrected for current prices and money.
Yeah, it was $1 trillion back a few years after we started when we did the calculation. So it's probably way past that right now.
All right, cool. Nico is a very interesting guy. He's an ideas guy, which I like. Okay, rounding out, we have a couple more. Shakeen, who's been on the show before. How you doing, Shakeen? Tell us your background, what you normally do in the game.
My background is I started off actually with a small industry research corporation. So I kind of was recruited into the game from that standpoint. So I kind of did a lot of exploration, then I did a lot of salvage. Then once I got my skills up, I started with T1 production, then I eventually struck out on my own, and now I do T2 and T3 production. So,
excellent.
Mostly I work with cruisers or battleships. So this definitely affects me in some ways, especially on the battleship front.
All right, and last but not least is someone from Army of Mangoes, a relatively new player. What should I call you? You have two names. I don't want to call out the wrong one. Can't hear you for some reason.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
You can call me Jason. That's the name that most of my crewmates call me.
Jason? Okay.
Yeah.
Jason, tell us your background in industry and that sort of thing.
So I started the game about a year ago, and I got into mining, and I basically mine for my own mineral, and I build it for myself, and I just use the ship that I built to do other things. I built a workup for myself and build a Nidhogger for myself. Both of them I use for myself, and I try to build most of the ships that I use. And I feel like you are emotionally attached to those ships when you build it yourself, and it's like that's my industrial background.
All right, cool. Okay, all these guys are people that hang out and talking in stations, and we discussed it on the reaction show, which we had earlier this week. You should see it with Kenneth Feld and myself on the cover there with a big reaction sign in the back. But we've also had discussions offline, which have been really good and interesting. And there's a lot more people than just this panel, but we've selected this panel. We'll have other guests later in the week as we do a few more industrial panels, again, with people from all strata of EVE Online. But first, let's talk about what these changes actually are in the game that are affecting industry. And for that, we go to Kenneth, our subject matter expert on industry.
Good afternoon. Yeah, it's the changes, as most people alluded to. The devlog dropped on Friday. The battle cruiser and below is basically not being touched by any of this. The non-faction battle cruiser and below is not being touched. And the theory is to help make those cheaper so that new players and people with relatively small amounts of ISK can replace their ships pretty easily. Faction ships and battleships are getting slightly more complex to build, probably going up a little bit in price once this all shakes out. Capital ships are getting much more complicated to build and will most likely increase in price. And super capitals are getting massively more complicated to build and most likely will end up at a significantly higher cost once this is all said and done. We, as a CSM, tried to maintain the same ratios kind of that we have in the game today as far as projected pricing, but none of us have any idea of how this is actually going to shake out.
Right. So, okay. That's the overview of what the changes are. I believe, and this is just theory, but and we want to set up why this is such a big change, that this is the beginning of many changes to everything that players build, probably. They are starting with ships. They're mixing up the ingredients, putting in different branches of ingredients that need to come in, which means there's more harvesting opportunities for people out there to become specialized in gas harvesting or mineral reacting, moon goo reacting, and that sort of stuff. So we can assume that even with just these ship changes, the new professions are going to spring up. But this is only the beginning. Probably all things will get a whole revamp that looks a lot more intricate than just minerals for things. Sorry, I have one last guest, and that is Dr. Spod. You've seen him here before. How's it going, Spod? Can't hear you. Can't hear you. Push
There
talk.
we go. Helps if I'm unmuted. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, and you are not only a CEO, but also you did some wormhole mining at one point, right?
Yeah, I used to run a small corp alliance thing, mining the hell out of C1s before CCP hit it on the head with a hammer.
Right. We can talk about that too. All right, guys, there it is. That's the patch notes that have come out. What are you guys' first reactions to this thing?
Actually, mine's kind of a question, if I may, to Kenneth, where he had mentioned that this increases the complexity. And I was kind of reviewing it. And if you were a T2 or T3 builder already, the complexity doesn't appear at surface level to be that much more. It's just different items. Or am I missing something real basic?
Sort of. You're correct. And I build T1, T2, T3 as well. So it really doesn't affect me much. But there's a lot of smaller Tech 2 producers out there who only have their science skills to level 4. And if you look at table 3 of the Excel thing, there's 20 science skills there that require level 5. So that's a considerable train for some people and will increase the complexity. Now, you're looking at complexity as you already know how to do reactions, you can do component builds, that kind of stuff. So the complexity isn't there. But to build a T1 Comet prior to this was just gather some minerals, hit the install button, and off you went. It's still going to be more complex to build the hull. However, you understand the component build process, the reaction build process. So the process or the workflow for you won't be more complex, but building the hull still will be. Does that make sense there?
Oh, absolutely. And I was looking at it going, the complexity of build, truthfully, not a big deal to me. Harvesting and gathering the resources is what's going to be interesting for me. So, yeah, it's going to be fun.
Well, there's also a little bit more to this whole thing with adding the skill requirements. It's bringing back speciality, and it's bringing back what I would call actual value to actual labor. We had a really good, large problem with the fact that the requirements to participate in these processes was way too low. That meant that it was too easy to brute force this with multiple accounts and alts, right? Now you're trying, or at least CCP seems to be trying to bring back speciality and participation and group activity, and also outsourcing of parts of the labor, because someone like Nick might not want to do or source all the things himself. He will maybe take one or two of the things that are a little bit annoying or far from his normal reach, and basically get someone else to do it and buy it from them. So either make actual deals by talking to someone, or actually engage with the market. This is extremely healthy for the game. This is also why I have kind of almost changed my mind, because my first reaction to this was, why did they not fix the slot problem with industry? Because infinite slots is a massive problem in industry these days. It's one of the things that completely flattened and chased away all the old school specialists from the game. But now I'm almost inclined to say that it makes sense to bring this type of stuff out first and then look at structures, NPC station building, and slots a little bit later. So they've almost changed my mind, which I find a little bit impressive, because I was
That's
ray
interesting.
tracing a lot, right? But now it makes sense. I almost see why they're doing this.
Okay. You almost got Kenneth to jump in the ring with you there. I'll give him a second, just 15 seconds. Go ahead.
The slot thing, the problem is infinite slots are usable forever with no drawback. If the taxes on a system that has an index of 8, 9, or 10 hurt, then the infinite slots wouldn't be a big deal because you're going to pay out the nose for them. They need to fix the taxes. And CSM, or a few of the CSM are pushing for this, to increase the taxes so that the infinite slots is offset by significant ISK outlay to install jobs.
Well, there's a little bit of a comment to that.
Right.
Because
you got 10 seconds and then we'll go on.
It's not so much taxes, it's cost, right? Ideally, you would want the index, the industry index, to actually be above, and then you would fix the downside on actual price and cost. So cost on fuel and cost on actual slots for NPCs, which would then make structures a competitor with NPCs. And this is where you want to go, just like you did with tax on broker fees and all those costs.
We'll leave that there and move on. I think Abby wanted to jump into the previous comment. Go ahead, Abby.
Yeah, sorry. So to get back on track and not talk about slots, these are great changes. These are taking items that mostly, for the most part, had no value and very little use, and they are making them more useful. That is both high-sec gas, that is some PI. They are adding these components to the bigger builds, and it's great to give them uses. Caleb made a very good point before that, where he said, people are now going to start supplying that market, and maybe the guys that just want to mine asteroids or just want to mine moons are going to be buying this stuff off the market and not go get it themselves. And I think that's a very good point. These changes have made it harder to vertically integrate everything yourself, and you have to now group up, corp up, alliance up. This is going to be like in the olden days when the first Titan was an alliance level commitment. This is making you have to go out there and interact with the market or with other players if you want to get the materials to be that top level industry producer. I love these changes.
Stamp of approval. Con, you have some? Can't hear you.
I'm kind of in agreement as to what everybody else is saying. With these updates that CCP has been releasing in the last few years or months, a lot of the changes have been geared towards communicating and trading and building relationships with people, whether that be negative or positive. What you'll see with these changes is you're not able to do everything by yourself. You have to communicate. You have to trade. You have to sometimes, if your neighbors have this certain item that you can't get, sometimes it's better just to be able to, communicate back and forth. And that's a good thing. Not being able to just do everything on your own is never good. And I'm liking this because I'm meeting people in the area that I've never met before, and I'm interacting with them, and I think that's cool.
Quick follow-up. You're somebody that deals with other people because you're a miner, so you're selling your goods to other producers and that sort of thing. Or actually, you have certain clients that you use. Are you finding that gameplay is expanding? Are you starting to get new people asking you for stuff? Like me, for instance?
All the time, yes. And it's just because a lot of people just don't want to do it. I don't know if it's like a mundane task that people don't enjoy, but the need for miners are there. And it's just readily available minerals that you could easily get, like Velspar or the R4 moon that you can get that gives you pyrite, and now the R4s that are going to be profitable as well.
Cool. All right, Jason,
and
you want to get in here? Oh, one more thing. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and all this can be accessed from a high-sec new player. They just from the jump, they can get a barge and they can already start contributing and trading with people around them that they're more likely to buy now that these changes are in place.
Jason, do you have a?
Yeah. So from
Jason,
my
then Joe.
Yeah.
Please
from
go.
my perspective, it's built for myself, so I don't interact my final product with the market. So if there's limited slots in a certain structure in a certain station, then that would be a big problem for me. at least because there's no point, like just in my case, to just add an extra limit to the structure build job like line up limit. That's because I don't interact with the market or anything like that. It would be just like a downgrade for quality of life, I guess. It's quality of life change, but change backward for me if there's going to be a limit on the structure.
Yeah, that's from more of a null perspective, and Khan is more of a low-sec empire perspective, just so people can orient themselves on their points of view. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I think it's a rather interesting time for CCP to do these changes exactly now, because we had a lot of fluctuation in the market before the changes, especially looking at P4 and PI in general. And with those other changes, the prices that were spiking in certain areas are even spiking a lot more. And looking at PI in particular, it was pretty much clear that the prices were catching up to the levels they were in, I guess, in the last spring, and people invested and prepared for that. And what CCP did is just accelerating the trend that was already there, I guess. And especially with R4 materials that will be needed more, I guess. It's going to be interesting to see more activity in HiSec when people start to mine R4 moons in HiSec again once they become profitable, meaning there will be more structures needed, and with more structures there will be more need for fuel, and there will be definitely need for more materials to build the structures. So that's going to accelerate the prices and the velocity of ISK in general even more.
As from Joe, he is from Black Flag. They are mercenaries in HiSec, can be hired to kill off your competition or to protect your convoys. Spot, you said this has been really good for your alliance. Tell us why.
There we go. Just to clear up the background, we've evolved since the wormholes into like a high-low, primarily high group. There's all industry focused, and because we have that overlap, the sort of low sec bottleneck when it comes to things like battleships is not an issue. So having that almost pre-set up has been a huge boon, because we've seen passive recruitment and the amount of interest from people wanting to get into industry has massively spiked since that announcement came out. You know, we've gone from receiving somebody maybe once a day, just passively passing by saying they're interested, to 4 or 5, and they're not the classic new player just trying the game sort of recruit. They're people that have been playing the game for years and have spun up an alt that want to try industry. So it seems like there's, well, whatever the ultimate consequences are, at the very least, they've hugely spiked interest in industry.
Do we have an idea? Anybody can answer this. Is this good or bad for new players? I hear a lot when changes are made that the people who are in power say, this is great for us, it's bad for the little guy. What do you guys think of that?
I think there's a telling thing, right? Because this brings me on to talk about Dunk, because Dunk started out with being very much against many of these changes, but he's softened up a bit. And I think that's because groups of his size have enough man hours that he can then distribute this out to his dudes, right? It makes sense to take advantage of these changes in the fact of actually putting real humans and distributing trust effectively, right? So he can see why this is actually a bit of a buff to someone like his group and Brave in general. And I think that's also why it proves that there is massive opportunity for new players to participate in this kind of industry. But of course, it requires trust. So it's not like a completely new player that's soloing is going to benefit from this. That's not where it's going to change. But if he connects with someone and they collaborate on stuff, or if he offers his services to a bigger group or a bigger dude, this will definitely benefit him. So this is basically a nerf against multi-boxing and solo gameplay, but it's a massive boost to anyone that engages in group activities. You can almost say it's forced grouping.
Mavril, do you remember the Friday show when we had Thanak afterwards? Before that show, I believe Murray talked about how this would affect the smaller producers, the smaller nullsec groups and such. But I believe Thanak, he's quite a small and very new industrial group. He sounded quite confident he's going to weather this and be able to adapt.
Right. Murray is from Rote Capel, mostly PvP. They worry about getting their resources in order to do their gameplay of PvP and stuff like that. And Thanik is a new CEO, brand new, relatively new player, building his empire from scratch, and he's already on his way. You can see his stuff that he streams on Gaming Since the 70s on YouTube. That's the channel, Gaming Since the 70s. And he's bringing people along. Yeah.
Can I just say something about Murray and the PvP aspect of this? Many of the people that might not have massive industrial activities or don't really want to do that, their main problem is not this industrial change. It's the fact that making PvP a viable lifestyle is a completely different change in balance stuff that CCP needs to look at. This is the whole thing of how loot drops work and how the whole ecosystem of how you get things from killing people work, right? This is something that I believe needs a massive overhaul because it needs to be incentivized based on what space you live in, how these things work. It's similar to the asset safety versus not asset safety in wormholes and K-space. I think we need to have that discussion because it needs to be viable to be a PvP if you're good at it.
Khan?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add in kind of, agreeing with Spot is, with this update, it once again gives people, new players specifically, more chances to contribute in certain inputs. Say, for example, with, mining the Malexalon rocks, a lot of people don't want to do it, so maybe the new player could just get into that aspect and specifically specialize in that, and that's how they get their start. Another thing, too, with battleships being revamped is a lot of these new players that maybe have a little bit of experience with producing ships, now they also get their foot kind of halfway into the water where they're starting to learn these things earlier on, where before, if you were going from T1 to T2, once you got into the T2 production, you were like, what the heck? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And that's because they didn't actually have the chance to learn that because all they were producing was just materials based off of the T1 ships at that point. So I think it's kind of cool where new players, they also will not only get the benefit to interact more in the ecosystem and the market, but they also have more chances to learn these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of the gases now that are going to be seeded into low sec and some select null sec systems are readily available in high sec. And getting a venture and some gas cloud harvester ones, you can be making a lot of money as a new person doing a couple of gas sites. And same with the PI and the R4 moons. This is distributing out valuable resources into high sec as well.
To just jump right in real quick, and I'll shut up. You can do most of this PI from ISEC. Like if you're an ISEC player and you're an Omega, you can actually just get a couple of, of course, just make sure that there's no tax involved with you extracting the PI, but you can get like a newbie starter PI infrastructure chain running, and you can just sell that as well. So there's a lot of chances is what I'm just trying to say to get into this.
Don't shut up. We don't want you to shut up.
Well, the important thing about all the things that you guys are talking about, and also Twitch chat, is that yes, this might be a bit more straining and maybe even frustrating to these solo groups and people that work on smaller scale. But the irony is that it's a benefit for them because it hurts the big organizations in a way where they are forced to designate and distribute that work. So there is a huge chance that it's going to come back and actually benefit you. This is very similar to the mining changes, where everyone was crying about the fact that mining was made harder. and now the little guy gets hurt. No, it's actually the opposite. When that happens, the massive multi-box scaling and things like that becomes way less effective. That means that now this stuff is going to be value added to you as a smaller guy, but not on the brute force scale. You can't do everything, but when you're doing one thing, that is going to be way more valuable than it was in the past. You need to add bottlenecks to incentivize group play and to put value back on what an individual player can do. This is exactly the type of stuff that we've been needed, because CCP made a big mistake when they started catering to, well, the casual or the brute force player base, right? So we went through the fat years and it completely messed things up. Now we're getting it back.
All right, thanks. Thanks for the subs, by the way, Foghat. Nick, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was looking at chat, and DreamPack 7 mentions in there, who gets hurt as a casual player, the person who doesn't have time to make Eve a full-time job. I disagree with that part, or enjoys doing stuff by himself. All right, he's got a good point there, because it kind of describes me right now, but I'm still not afraid, and neither should that newer player, from finding that small group. Khan's group is a great example of a friendly, high-low sec group that would welcome someone in to hang out with them in mind, even if you've just got an hour here, 2 hours there. There's a lot of groups like that. There's a lot of play style that can be supported, even if you have very limited time.
Yeah, for a new player, the opportunities available to make ISK are going to grow significantly. Huffing gas, PI is going to become more diverse, and P2 PI is going to be used a little bit more. So those are much more new player friendly. And then if you fly a ship that gets blown up, battlecruiser and below should be theoretically easier to replace and cheaper, and you're making more ISK on top of it. Those changes were specifically targeted to be new player friendly.
And I think a lot of people are saying how, it's unfair they've added reactions to battleships and how it's limiting the new player. I don't think it's limiting the new player. The new player can still make everything up to except for battleships, right? So they're not going to be limited. And I like the idea of adding this stuff to the battleship, because it makes the battleship more like the capital of HiSec, I think. And I think it kind of gives people a taste of that extra complicated step when you're building that quote-unquote capital of HiSec.
Well, a lot of people have said that, and I've thought about it. In the past, I could build my own battleship, but you went to JITA and you bought Zydrene and Megasite. Those both came from nullsec. You can't mine those in HiSec. It's no different now, except for you're going to have to buy Zydrene, Megasite, and a little trinket that comes from a reaction. But you're still going to be able to assemble the hull in HiSec just like you can before. It'll just be built in HiSec with materials sourced from lowsec or nullsec. And it's no different than it is currently. It's just you have to buy one more item. But the Zydrene and the Megasite never came from HiSec to begin with. It was just easier. But you still have to
Mega and Zydrene. Oh, sorry for the interruption. The Mega and Zydrene, prior to the changing of the moon ores, when they first came out in HiSec, yes, you could get them there, but limited.
Do you think it might be good to buff T1 battleships since they're getting a little more complex?
Yeah, I can't talk about that, but I can say that I am pushing for that to happen. We'll just leave it at that.
I have something for Kenneth, because Kenneth and Nico will most likely get this point. I think what's funny is to hear all these people in today's Eve that are complaining about changes like this, saying, well, now I won't be able to just build my own things. And this goes all the way up to there's actual people that are solo building their Titans. Back 8 years ago or more, if you said you were going to build your own Titan from scratch with only your own accounts, people would have laughed at you. That's like, this is not even supposed to be possible. And this is the whole thing with people saying, well, my solo industry, and what if I'm a casual and just want to build everything myself? Well, that's not how the game is supposed to work. Of course, you can do it, and you still can. It's just going to be extremely difficult and extremely costly, just like it's supposed to be. When CCP flattened things to cater to this type of casual stuff and this type of anti-N+1, they started killing the game, because you cannot have a social game like EVE Online that caters or tries to equalize a solo player with a group player. It's just not going to work. And the game have only lasted for 18 years because it was group oriented.
All right, got it. But a counterpoint to that is someone that has joined relatively recently, like Jason, and has said, "Oh, okay, well, I have my aspirational goals, and then that is getting changed on those people." There's got to be some frustration for people who said, like, "Well, this is the path I was on, and you just made it exponentially harder to get there." Jason, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I was gonna say, as a solo player, to some point, it's good in a way where CCP is pushing me or the group of people who are like me, who are doing stuff solo. We are being pushed to do something that we've never done before, like going to wormhole to do like gas harvesting, or ninja mining Mungu in high sec, stuff like that, right? Those things we have never done before. CCP is pushing us to that way. Yes, it is getting much more complicated as our final product may delay a few months compared to before the patch, but the fun is during the grind. The fun is during the process of actually grinding for your ship in a way where you're building it, not just earning the ISK to buy it.
Yeah. Sorry, just a quick counter to that is, like, you shouldn't be allowed make certain things all on your own. Like, that's their whole argument here, and this is something they're pushing. I was on a path to become an astronaut, but I'm never going to be an astronaut. So I have to group up with some friends and make a cardboard box and pretend I'm an astronaut. Like, I'm sorry you can't get to build your Titan yourself, but I agree with Caleb. You should not be able to do that. It's one person, one guy.
Okay, let's go back to the battleship thing. Let's get away from Titans. It always seems to go up to Titans like that's some kind of normal thing, and it's not. So we'll talk about battleships again. Con, you wanted to comment?
Can I interject real fast on that one?
On that one, yeah, then come back.
I think you have a problem in the discussion, and that is we're not addressing the difference between what is the economy aspect and what is the player aspect, right? I don't think that's being addressed in the way we're talking about this, because you have some people talking about how it's going to affect the economy, and you have other people discussing about how it's going to affect their personal gameplay. If we go back to Shen's current or previous comment, his point is he cannot at this point go out and do all this. He has to learn all these new avenues of gameplay, which is a valid point. You can go out and learn all these different avenues, and it's going to take you a considerable amount of time to skill up and get the gear to do it. But the economic side, which CCP is pushing for in these changes, is you stimulate market activity. So rather than Shen going out and doing it, another player is actually going to specialize in going to get that Moongu, or another player is going to specialize in going to get that gas. And then Shen is going to specialize in what he's doing, and they're going to have trade, and that will facilitate market. So these changes are driving competition. They're not, if you look at it from I'm a solo player and I want to do everything, you have no competition in what you're doing. These changes are specifically going after creating market competition.
Got it. We got that point. I just want to go back to, by the way, Shen is Jason, same person that was just talking earlier. I want to go back to battleships because somebody here, Kanti Luden, says, okay, per battleship, total of 1650 fuel blocks are needed. 862 are oxygen, 762 are hydrogen. This needs to spread out more. What's the problem with battleships? Con, you wanted to comment on battleships and creating them.
Well, not so much in the creating part, but more as to their usefulness. Buffs are important, but I feel like the primary thing that are affecting battleships in the low sec region are Titans and super capitals. And what you'll see is, using Snuff as an example in faction warfare, is you'll see them not be likely as to drop on certain activities, and you'll see a lot of these battleships kind of like start to take over as far as when it comes to being not only like a primary tool that you would use in these engagements, and that also have to be threatened. So like, let me count it back up because I'm not doing a very good job explaining myself here. So what I kind of feel like is that you're going to see battleships kind of emerge and become more useful than they were, because one of the biggest deterrents of using battleships were always that fear of having somebody third party and drop on you. And with this change, you'll kind of you'll kind of see an improvement in low sec, because there will always be that fear, is if I drop my Titan on this this small gang of battleships, do I have the ability to lose that, and how much would that ISK value cost them in the long run?
All right, Kenneth, let's go into some direct questions that just need to be answered. They keep coming up. Let me grab these here. The first one is question 1. Why does Table 4 Super Capital Ship Blueprints have no T2 ships other than Exhumers and Expedition frigates?
If you read the blog at the very end, it talks about the next thing that they're going to start looking at is Tech 2 ships. If you look at the Tech 2 that's on there, I'm pretty sure there's no or very minimal changes to those. So I think like something got changed by 2 or something like that. So there were extremely minimal changes that don't affect anything. So they added them in. But the next thing to be touched is Tech 2 ships. That's why there's only that one specific one on there for a benign change, if I recall correctly.
Okay, question 2. Why is the Scorpion, and only the Scorpion, less material intensive to build than literally every other T1 battleship?
The Scorpion basically doesn't have any offensive capabilities. It's generally a support ship across the board, and that is my gut feel. I have not asked. I don't know why they chose to do that, but generally that ship doesn't have any offensive capabilities or very minor offensive capabilities, and that's what I reason it to.
It's also got less trit and materials involved in it too. This is the second part. The follow-up here is, why is the Scorpion less trit ISO intensive now than the Megathron when it was more intensive before?
That's why we're doing a balance.
Okay.
Well, that's the logistic strain, right? It's very important to point out that the reason they did this is to lighten up the logistic strain a little bit, but not at the cost of value. So I think it's a really good change.
Second follow-up on that question about the Scorpion. Why are 2 cruisers from each empire, the Arbitrator and the AUG, Blackbird, Osprey, Celeste?
Right, all of them except for the Mimitar.
Thank you.
I'm not sure on that, and I will inquire about that tomorrow.
Okay.
Well, like the Arbitrator and the Agorer are Logi and Disruption, so they're not like combat.
They're support. Okay.
Yeah.
So those are the quick fire stuff that we wanted to get out there.
Right. Yeah. The reason that the 2 cruisers are lower is because they're support. The real question is, why aren't the 2 Mimitar ones that are in that role in the reduced category as well, I think.
Yeah, the Scythe and the Bellicose.
Yeah.
I think it's the additional duct tape you need to hold them together.
Since we're doing questions, I do want to address one to Kenneth, even though it might be NDA. What about structures and structure building? Because right now we're looking at these changes landing something like a Titan at a point where it's more expensive than a Keepstar. That doesn't fit in the game, right? The structure should be a tier up from our shipbuilding. So have the CSM and CCP actually started talking about structures changes in a similar way to this? Because if we're getting Tech 2 and then maybe modules, then the next natural thing would be something like fixing structures as well.
The dev blog is pretty clear that Tech 2 ships are going to be next.
That's a very vague reply to my question.
He can't talk about certain things because of certain obligations, so let's infer what we want from that without getting him in trouble.
Deferred. Yeah, by the way, everybody should read the dev blog a few times. I didn't find that it was very straightforward. Really, a lot of the meat and potatoes of these changes are in the details. So they provided you with a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet that had multiple tabs on it, so you could start to see what some of the composition of these things are going to be. The overall theoretical changes are, however, that more and varied ingredients are going into these ships, which means more and varying harvesting gameplay is going to be in demand, which is why we're talking about the synergy between people who are harvesting and building subcomponents with people who are building the larger components. So Nico, you're somebody that actually put a business together, a corporation together that was a service corporation, and it was huge, and it helped a lot of new players that didn't have a lot of income potential to get income because they were salvaging for people they didn't even know. And you put those relationships together. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so just a quick comment on everything that's been said as far as new players and industry. There's going to be anything within reason, and I'll leave this up to your imaginations without going too deep into it, but within reason and within limit, anything that increases complexity and anything that increases reliance and cooperation on other people, I believe is a great thing for EVE. Again, yes, there's some people who just don't never want to talk to anyone, and maybe their gameplay will be affected by somewhat. But in general, that's not the kind of players you want to, balance an economy around. So the reason ProSynergy worked as an idea is because for a mission runner to salvage is a waste of money. And for a new player to salvage is a great way to make money. So you kind of synergize those two forces. And same thing here. If somebody can hire, or let's say either directly or via market, or just go recruit newer players who don't have the skill set for a certain activity, but they can fill in the lower roles, it's a good opportunity for people to be forced to interact with each other and work with each other. I have in my industry corp, not even in ProSynergy, but in my industry corp, we had a similar thing where we had advanced players who were experienced, and they were reserved for when we needed high skill, like invention done. And we had newer players who were just coming into EVE or just starting into industry, and they had low skills, but we could use them for copying blueprints. So we didn't waste our high skill characters on copying blueprints. We had newer players copying the blueprints and doing basic research and things like that. So it's any kind of complexity like that is it's gonna increase the maximum skills that you need to achieve perfection and make everything by yourself. But it's actually going to help the newer player because they will be more useful and be able to contribute, and that's what they like. Like, just speaking from experience of dealing with new players for years and years and thousands of them, literally, they love being part of a larger whole and contributing. So I think it's a good thing.
They just need a safe way in emotionally, I would think, like a group that is pre-programmed to not trick them, not humiliate them. I imagine that makes it easier to open that door to a new player cooperating with somebody else. But there is a cost to working together, and that is communication time. So now you've got to talk to people. Now you've got to, sometimes players just want to play because they have a limited amount of time, limited amount of concentration. And here you're asking them to now talk with somebody that may slow all that down. Isn't that a concern?
No, because again, you have people who like to play EVE hardcore and treat it as a second job, right? And they put those systems in place to make it easier for everyone else to come in and play casually. So there's initially, you have to recruit someone, you have to talk to them and explain to them, well, this is how it works. Maybe there's a bit of initial training involved. But after that, it's for our salvagers, it was simple as coming in, look at the contracts, accepting a contract, dropping it off. They don't have to process the loot. They don't have to haul it. They don't have to worry about anything. It actually encourages casual gameplay once you go, once you break the barrier of, hello, how are you doing? What do you do? How do you do it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and if you set up a lot of stuff for them to not have to get all complicated. Yeah.
And
I can hear some new players in the back of your sound there.
And the same thing was the Industry Corp. We had a spreadsheet for newer players that joined the Industry Corp. It was a smaller scale, but we had like 20 members, maybe 30 members. They would log in and they would look at the spreadsheet, see, we need to copy this. They would start putting the copying jobs, and that's it. And then they would get paid on the end of the month with the profit share, that we had going on. So I think it's just encourages cooperation. I think it's beautiful, and it's, that's my 2 cents on it.
We'll see what springs up. Who are the winners? Go ahead, Jason.
Just going for the corporate, corporate play style with industry now. I feel like for me as a solo player, it's more gonna. So right now the T1 ships are more like T2 ships, where you need a lot of reactions and other materials that's not like just normal minerals. So I think I will start treating them more like T2 material, T2 like modules, those things as well. So right now, what I do with T2 modules, I will buy the blueprint BTC from the contract. I'll make everything I can out of minerals, either just make the T1 based module and make the starship tech or like the small robot that assembles the module and mine morphite myself and everything. And then I'll buy the T2 component from Jita and then haul it back to NOSEC. So I mean, that seems like one of the things that I need to start doing with even normal T1 production now. But I'll still try my best to, let's say, mine everything I can, like gas or some R4 Mungu in high sec and stuff like that. But there will be something that I can't, let's say, it's like low sec gas or something like that. That's too dangerous, which is not worth the risk for me.
And you're far away from vendors of that sort of thing too.
Yeah, we're in deep no sec.
Yeah, you're in the army of mangoes. All right. Do you guys have any other questions, comments to each other?
I have one on the new player aspect.
Go ahead.
Just before we get away from the new players and talk about other topics. This might sound a little crass. For a long time in EVE, the industrial gameplay has kind of been a prey in the game to the large PvPer base. I think one of the dynamics that I'm not saying will happen, but could happen is strictly hunting or geared groups may start to broaden their horizons, much like larger blocks have done, where they might go, okay, this has become complex enough to where I can't reasonably do it on my alt without really investing time. So I'm going to go out and find 2 or 3 new industry players and bring them in and protect them. They can be my industry wing. So it might even create opportunities where they're in specific smaller groups, bringing and rising that industrial play to the same scale of PvP, rather than just ostracizing it or hunting it as prey for their own gameplay. I'm not saying it will happen. It's something I hope does happen. So it's more opportunities for new players, potentially.
This sounds like industrialization and globalization, where now you can't be self-reliant, you can't be isolationist, you can't be North Korea. You're going to have to integrate. Trade is the lifeblood of, well, this game and a lot of other things, and you're going to have to integrate things all across the world, all across the game, and from all different backgrounds, even to build the humble battleship now.
Kenneth?
Yeah, and I don't want to say his name, but someone on a show that I was on the other day was talking kind of about this too. And his idea was to hand out skill injectors to people to get their skills up to build this stuff. And maybe that's what he wants to do, whatever. But as I've cultivated people to help PL grow in their industry, what I would do is if someone needs to build 10,000 guns and that's a little overwhelming for them, then I kind of help out. I'll provide some of the Tech 2 components or whatever their bottleneck is. I look at it, okay, their bottleneck is this. It's going to take them 28 days to build this with their build slots that they have and this kind of stuff. So if I can build 50,000 of them in 2 days and just give them to them, or, this changes hands, but makes it profitable for them, then here you go. And it kind of gives them a head start, and then they can do the rest of the cleanup along the way. These new blueprints that are coming in, that's what I plan to do. The blueprints are kind of expensive. On the high end, there are $3 billion a piece for the blueprints. Most of the other ones are $1.5 billion. I figure patch day, my bill is going to be about $150 billion to buy the blueprints that I need. So that being said, if I need to kind of help people along to get the materials that they need so that everybody in PL can build, that's what I'm going to do. And as far as the coordination part of it, it's real easy for me because it's just me. Now, if you're in a corp and you have spreadsheets and stuff and it works for you, that's great. And I like hearing that because that means that you're kind of moving down the same path. And that's how I plan to help spread it around until the people can afford these new blueprints and get slightly more self-sufficient. In the meantime, I'll be making copies and handing the copies out as well. Now, that's only for the high-end capital stuff. The reactions and that kind of stuff are like 10 million a piece. Some of the lower-end ones are only 40 million. So I saw Nick having a moment there. Yeah, it's only the real high-end stuff. That, I mean, like right now, Capital Doomsday mounts are 2.6 billion, I think, NPC price. So these blueprints are not crazy priced. It's just if you're not building Capitals and Titans now, you're probably not used to seeing these numbers. But for those of us that are, it's no big deal. So there will be some sharing late down the road, I think, mostly due to that too.
But the important thing in that whole detailed explanation is what you said when you said that someone is actually handing injectors to new members. This is basically proving that to new players or less skilled players, these have now been given a lot more value. So much value that people will start giving them things just to fix this whole outsourcing problem. So new players are definitely already proven to be benefiting from this.
Do you think we're going to see specific
new players? They're to their existing players that have built for them.
Do you think we're going to see, I guess, people specialize in each specific component? With the English longbow, you had the Fletcher, the bowyer, the stringfellow, and we're going to see people specialize in making each specific component for each along the way now.
Well, if you're doing what Kenneth is, that's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to get the conveyor belt production line, and it's going to be massively effective if you do that in your big null group industry.
It sounds medieval, the idea of that each part and component is going to have more people specializing, I guess an entire corp or family or individuals making that one part to build into the bigger thing.
Well, you got to remember, to build a super now, you're talking, I think if I did the math right, it's a 5 or 6 layer tier of inputs, gas inputs, and then build a reaction, and then that reaction is the input in a blueprint, and then that blueprint goes into this. It's getting complex for sure. And anytime you make something complex like that, if someone wants to cut out some of that complexity, they buy. And where on that chain they buy affects anyone else's ability to build something and make a profit up to that point. And everyone's pain point is going to be different along that chain. Some people like me are what do you call it, masochists or whatever, that just want the complete pain, so I'll do the whole chain. But some other people may just say, nope, I'm cutting my losses at the second chain and I'll buy everything else below that. And anytime someone's willing to do that, there's a market for anything leading up to that point.
You speak of layers, and it reminds me of the production of Japanese swords, where they had entire families for the production of metal, the production of the sword, the sharpening of the sword, the polishing of the sword, and even furnishing the sword at each level.
Woodwork still works. Woodwork works
you're not
the same
building
way.
swords.
It's fundamental economics. It goes back to the Wealth of Nations, where he talks about the pin and how the pin can be broken down and industrialized. It's basic economic principle.
Thank you for that one. That was brilliant.
All right, so it seems to me that for adaptation purposes, advanced players that used to have the whole vertical chain fixed up should get comfortable with, and this is where the expertise come in and the gameplay is figuring out what they can buy easier to relieve that pain point and build the rest. So they're going to now have to pick and choose from the menu what to buy, what to build themselves, and where the best profits are, the best equilibrium for them. That was kind of a question, but I take all your silence as a yes.
Yeah, you said it perfect.
When all that is done, right, Merrill, when everyone has now adapted to this new normal, that's when CCP is then going to drop something like limitation or things on slots. So null does not become, well, because otherwise null would
slots in there.
Well, if not, null would become overly dominant. If not,
all right. One more thing. This goes, I think, to Kenneth, and then we'll open it up to everybody else. Who are the winners here? Who are the winners, and maybe who are the losers in this? And is that the way we should even look at these changes?
I think the winner is CCP in a certain extent, because no one's talked about anything else for the past 3 or 4 days, and probably will continue to talk about this until mid to late April. But I think overall for the changes, the goal, and it says it right in the front of the dev blog, the new players have much more opportunity to earn ISK in a variety of different ways, as well as new player ships. And I'm talking Battlecruiser and below, Tech 1, should get cheaper in the long run, which will be easier for them to replace. And as they progress in their career, yes, things are going to get more expensive. But for the short term in their career, it should be easier. And I think that's a new win to cultivating new players to the game. And I'll just leave it at that.
All right. We'll just actually ask you guys who the winner. Well, anybody else want to say who the winners, losers are?
EU is the winner.
I think there's a clear loser, and it's specifically targeted to be a clear loser, and that is cap proliferation.
Yeah, and I think the important thing when Kenneth says that CCP is the winner, that's the whole point. This is back to the fact that CCP initially didn't expect that EVE Online would live for longer than 5 years. When it then did, because they had made that magic sauce, they were kind of excited and got all those big dreams, and they kept growing all the way up to like 2011, right? The interesting thing is that on the other side of that, they started having trouble with the ecosystem and things like the fat years and abundance. And this is making sure that we can survive another 10 years, because if we had not made these changes, EVE would not have had another 10 years. Now it potentially does. And they can get back into growth and actually be a little bit ambitious again, because they're rolling out new titles. They're doing all these things, collaborations and servers in China and all that shenanigans. So we're seeing CCP come back in force the way they were before the Summer of Rage. So this is really looking good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really believe this is the groundwork or the foundation for the next 10, 20 years of EVE Online, these industry changes here.
You should also expect more. You can't take it in isolation. This is directly linked to the resource changes of the last major patch, and it will be directly linked to the next iteration of the patches. It's just a long-term shift in how the gameplay works. They can't do it in a short period of time, but it's a part of a more holistic plan, is what I see from these changes.
Everybody's kind of hitting on what the winners are, and I agree. Long term, absolutely is the CCP and EVE side. The loser to me is those players that don't want to change. They don't want to. They're very comfortable in their current style, and they don't want to look at this as a potential opportunity or something new to learn.
Yes, exactly.
I think.
Go ahead. Let's go Nico, and then Khan.
Yeah, basically nothing new to add.
everybody said already.
Oh,
that, you know,
yeah. I'm sorry, Nico. I thought it was Joe that talked, right?
Yeah, right. I would say exactly the same as Nick. The losers are only people who are not willing to adapt, and probably they shouldn't be in industry anyways if they cannot or don't want to adapt. Winners definitely are going to be the newer players. As things get more complex, older players will move up. They will specialize even more, and that will open up niches for new players to get in. I'm looking at PI, for example, but there are definitely other things.
And Con?
Yeah, I kind of feel like from an industry standpoint, there are multiple winners. Your builders are going to have more chances to expand more. Your miners are going to, of course, get more income from the minerals because with the pain of these changes happening, you'll see the material price and the R4 prices go up. And then you'll also see the winner from the small scale guy because now they'll have a seat at the table in these larger, more complex building queues where, as before, they wouldn't have that opportunity to get into that aspect.
The interesting part here is diplomacy used to be just among the alpha dogs, right? Like all the big alliances would negotiate with each other, but now they have to negotiate with low-sec, maybe even wormhole groups. Like the diplomacy is also going to expand in territories we haven't seen before.
And also between smaller groups, diplomacy between two smaller groups of maybe sharing a resource and helping defend each other. Somebody mentioned earlier on, I'm not sure exactly who, but talking about, I think it was Kenneth, where you find your pain point. And that I think is going to be one of the more interesting things for the small, medium to small size industrial folks of identifying their pain point. And I'm actually already begun that process, to look at it of what do I have the time, the capacity, and the willingness to do, and at what point do I go, screw it, I'm buying it, and that's going to be fun.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to go into the ending cycle here with, everybody's like last words and comments on this thing. And we'll just go from top to bottom with, actually, before we do that, I wanted to drag Abby out as a former in-game drug dealer. Because that was an interesting job and gameplay that has gone away. Sorry, I'm outing you. But this is so interesting, and the gameplay was wrecked by a change that made drugs legal. So legalization in EVE Online was a disaster for drug dealers in the game. But describe what that was like, because it does tie in, and I'll tell you why afterwards.
Okay, so very quickly, drugs, quote-unquote drugs, or the combat boosters, whatever you want to call them, they used to be illegal in the game. So if you were flying through a gate and police scanned you, they had them in your cargo, they confiscate them and fine you. You could not get them on the market, and you had to set up contracts. You could not set up a contract to sell them. You actually had to set up a contract to buy them, and then the seller would have to fulfill them. It was really complicated. But there was a great gameplay because these were reactions that were made in low-sec, and then you'd make the drugs, and there was a very few groups that did it. The group I was in was, I don't want to toot our own horn, but it was the Hedonistic Imperative Alliance, or Ease and Wiz was the corp name, and we were probably one of the biggest and longest running drug selling groups in the game. But I used to like to role play as a drug dealer. And one thing I did was, so if like low sec people and null sec people would buy them, and if I couldn't dock up in a structure or if I was having fun, I would make the person like warp out to a random planet and a random moon and get in position, and then I'd make them transfer the money to me, and then I'd decloak and like drop the drugs in a can and be like, I gotta go, the faction police are here, yo. and then just like warp off and cloak up, and like I used to use like make people like give me code words and just totally play that cheesy drug dealer role. But they made the drugs legal. I guess it's a good thing because you get them in your login rewards now, and it's a bit easier to use them. But it completely ruined that style of sketchy roleplay gaming.
Now they should make it PvP. So if I scan you and you have drugs, you become flagged and I can kill you.
I would welcome that change back.
Well, it's just sad that gameplay went away because it was really interesting. I remember talking to people who had like their drug dealers of choice.
Yes,
and
you would like how we worked was the alliance. We all grouped our stuff like, and the gas comes from all different regions in space. So I would go out to say Delve and sell someone drugs and pick up some gas, and then I go to their enemy, pick up some gas from them, sell them drugs, and people had their contacts and. There wasn't that many of us that did it at one time, but it was great. It was really cool.
Oh, well, and the way that ties in is just creating gameplay around opportunities to fill voids. And what this change is doing is creating so much expansion in the industrial complex. It will create voids because people won't be able to do all the things they need to do. So I see in the future people being able to find a career, not as sexy as drug dealing, right? Miami Vice, but
no, I mean, yeah, I was pretty sexy.
Yeah, it's definitely, yeah, I can imagine. But there's going to be areas where people can develop niche stuff, like maybe even just ripping things off, hubcaps on a car and then selling them on the market or something. I don't know. It could be very interesting what happens here.
I really think the gas huffing is going to become a big thing because, like, with them putting it everywhere now, it's so accessible for newbies once you get that gas huffing skill book, which you can find with exploration, by the way, guys. You don't have to pay like 50 million for it or whatever it is. It's great.
Well, there you go. Right. So that's why I wanted to bring it up. The relationship to gas. So anybody who's like an ex booster maker can now find a whole new market for his product, which is kind of be interesting.
And can we start a campaign to make drugs illegal again so I can have my fun back?
Yes. Yeah, let's bring that back. Look, get rid of ganking, put back in drug dealing.
Kenneth, get rid of ganking, bring back drug dealing, please.
Make it happen. All right, let's go into last comments. If you have last comments on these changes, your last words on it. And we'll start with Joe, again, from Black Flag. He's a high-sec mercenary, and he is also an industrialist. Joe?
Yeah, just in general, I really really happy about the changes, and I'm definitely very interested how or where CCP is going to take this. We started with ships, capitals in particular, but I'm expecting that this is gonna move on to structures and modules as well, and it will be very interesting to see how CCP is gonna interact with market, with the economy, now that they have some tools to actually fine-tune certain aspects of the game. And in addition to that, I think constant change is going to be the new normal. If you're looking at the last year, I guess that became pretty apparent, and I think overall that's a pretty good thing.
Awesome. We look forward to seeing what you do with it. Next is Khan. He is, again, he's from Dam Fam, and they are faction war miners. They work with Ashra Khan, and they feed him a ton of materials and ships and that sort of thing. So that's his perspective. Khan, your thoughts on this?
I'm actually very excited for this change as a miner because, as somebody who's specialized pretty much all of their gameplay into one aspect and nothing other than that, basically me prioritizing just mining gives me even more of a possibility to, do trade and increase my value in the overall game, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Abby?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Adding this like half a tier step, making battleships to capitals a high sec, giving more people more opportunities, more trade, more everything. I love it.
Jason from AOM Nullsec.
Yeah. So in my perspective, this really like I guess delayed the final goal from where I am right now, but this also pushes me to the mining that I usually don't do, like gas harvesting in wormholes and like the moon mining high sec stuff like that. So it'd be I'm really excited to do those things. And I wanted to do them before, but I guess this time just CCP pushed me in that direction to do it.
Right. Caleb?
Well, I'd just like to say that having followed this development quite closely, because I've been screaming about it for 5 or more years, right? I had reservations and I was a little bit doubting for a while, and I have been on many occasions. Everyone has been screaming that the ecosystem team don't know what they're doing. Well, maybe they're not doing this perfectly, but considering the resources that CCP has and the way that they've been rolling changes out over the past 18 months, I'm very impressed. It's not exactly what I expected, but seeing what can then come in the next iteration, so the next 6, 12, 18 months, I am definitely seeing this moving back into something healthy. And I suspect that even though sometimes the CSM is blamed for lobbying, I think in this case, they might actually have been doing their job and being forthcoming and engaging in the dialogue and realizing that change is required. So I'm very happy with both the CSM and the CCP's work. I think this is looking really good. It's slower than I expected because I kind of want to get back into my old style gameplay like soon. But it looks like I have to have a little bit of patience. But then again, everyone has been requiring patience during these last 8-9 months of warfare, right? So I'm just going to have to be in the same boat.
Nico. Oh, okay. Caught him. All right. Kenneth, and we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I'm just super excited to hear that players of different styles than me particularly are happy about these changes. I was kind of worried about some of them. Mind you, the CSM didn't get to make the overall decisions on this. We just kind of got to trim the edges and work out some things. So that really gives me hope for the future. I get it. The iteration's coming. Some things get iterated on, some don't. I get it. I understand it. I can only go by my experiences over the last 8 months on the CSM, or 10 months, however long it's been now. And I am really optimistic about the future. I'm glad that other people are seeing the same thing. I'm floored that Caleb agrees with me, because that typically doesn't happen. Yeah, looking forward to the next set of changes and interlacing those with what we've already done.
All right. Well, I want to say thanks to the audience of over 320 people for asking questions and commenting in chat. Also want to say thanks to our industrialists that we'll say goodbye to in just a second. And I want to say thanks to the staff that made this show possible. So in order, of course, Kenneth, who presented all the information, continues to. He's running for CSM. He's running for re-election. So keep that in mind, because he's been really great at communicating this in a way that's understandable. I want to say thanks to Abby Rova, our drug dealer, our resident drug dealer.
No problem. I got your hookup, buddy.
You got me? Okay. Khan from Ushra Khan. Caleb, Spod, Dusk, G.I. Joe Dirtbag from Black Flag, Nick Bison, wave there, Nick. Nico Lorenzio, who made a great service-oriented corp long ago. And Rich Richmond, Shakeen Sutonia, and Jason from Army of Mangoes. Thank you guys for your time and for all your wisdom and information. Really appreciate it.
And don't forget the stream.
Yes, thank you. I was about to do that. There's going to be a CCP stream tomorrow that you should check into. It'll be official. And it is the Eve ecosystem will be live streaming tomorrow. That's Monday, March 29th at 1700 UTC. Don't miss that. There'll be plenty of information there, maybe some details officially from CCP.
I'll be on that stream as well.
And you'll be there too. Great. All right. Thank you guys very much. That is all we have time for this week. We will see you next week. Oh, I forgot McLeod, our engineer who's been here the whole time. Thank you very much. We will see you next week on Talking in Stations.